Greek proverb, I am because we are, is the foundation of the ACBN YouTube channel. Tap in for all of our remarkable content and ecosystem mobilization through the phenomenal practitioners and thought leaders we engage on this channel. In the words of Adrienne Marie Brown, things are not getting worse, they are getting uncovered. We must hold each other tight to pull back the veil. Get ready for another amazing ACBN powered interview.
So as you all know, on the Spirit of Excellence, we want to first acknowledge the session with the original stewards of the various lands that we are all on. We also want to acknowledge our ancestors and those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We acknowledge our elders and community stewards whose shoulders we all stand on as we build, share, and learn together for the collective liberation and sovereignty of our people. So as I said, we have a remarkable panel of phenomenal sisters here today. And I'd like each of the sisters to go ahead and introduce themselves, starting with Ama Seed Change. Go ahead.
Thank you so much for having me. My name is Leticia Ama Amponsah, born in Ghana, raised in Jane and Finch, Toronto, and I'm the current executive director of Seed Change. It's an international NGO working with partners in 12 different countries on food sovereignty, starting with seeds. So really happy to be here. Thanks.
Thank you so much, sister. And Peachtree?
Greetings, and possibly morning or afternoon, depending on where you are signing in from. I know we're a global village. Yes, my name is Peachtree. I'm in Toronto. I have an extensive background in land work and food sovereignty work. I'm currently the co-creator of the National Black Farmer Fund, which is a collective of farmers and land workers who are building funds and resources to support each other outside of our, normal economic ways of developing money and supports, as well as I am building a seed space. I'm really looking at what the importance of seeds in our community, both culturally and to nourish ourselves, and what the intellectual property rights are around that piece. And last but not least, a beekeeper. I love beekeeping. So I spend lots of time in the bush with bees. Give thanks for having me here.
I love it. Thank you so much for being here. And our sister, Ama?
Greetings, everyone. I'm Ama, and I'm a wife and mother of 4. I'm currently practicing regenerative farming. I'm trying to move away from modes and modalities that are actually harmful to the earth. And a lot of our focus in the regenerative movement is just how do we implement the right practices that are not just sustainable, but in tune with nature. So of course, seed sovereignty is a big issue because a lot of the inputs that farmers currently need are getting quite expensive, as you can see, globally what's happening. So I'd also like to support anybody that's interested in moving towards, waste management practices that, also help, the land and our fellow farmers, or even just on a global scale, in terms of distribution and of information. I would definitely love to be a part of that as well.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much for sharing. So my first question is for Leticia. What role does the seed sovereignty play in the world today? Or sorry, I'm a seed change.
I know, I want to give a shout out to all the Amas on the call today. It's Saturday, it's our day, I think, before I even dive into that, I think it's important to kind of break down sort of what we understand of the how seed sovereignty and the importance of that, because I think that will lay a ground to also answering the question that you asked, sis. I think, why seeds are important is because, we have huge multinational corporations that control basically the seeds. Why is that work important? It's important because, you know, they take over our seeds and then we get genetically modified seeds. And those seeds actually need a lot of chemical input. Like our sister Ama mentioned in her introduction, which then the inputs we become very dependent on to feed us. And those inputs does not necessarily work for every climate and actually has a huge impact on our planet, on people, and on farmers. It makes farmers financially dependent on these large corporations. And overall, it has a huge impact in terms of our ability to feed ourselves, especially in this climate change situation that we're in right now. As many know, we need diverse crops, right? We need a diversification of crops in order to sustain ourselves. Our ability to feed ourselves, our ability to survive on this planet is actually very much dependent on that diversification. And to your question, especially now, I'm in Ottawa right now where it's minus 41 degrees. Sorry, my dog. Sorry, Midnight, come here. I'm in Ottawa right now where it feels like minus 41 degrees right now. As folks remember, you know, the floods in Pakistan, the heat waves across Europe, mudslides, all these different challenges that we're facing. Midnight, I'm so sorry. He sees a car and he starts barking. All these different challenges, it's going to and is having a huge impact in terms of our ability to feed ourselves globally. So seed sovereignty is crucial and is important because, as we all understand, and I think I repeat this many times, those who control the seeds control our food. And when you have large corporations like the merger of Bayer and Monsanto, right, a pharmaceutical company, merging with a seed company, and really that continued push for chemical fertilizers globally as like the only way to feed us, which we know that that's not true, right? And that it's not about feeding people, but in fact, it's about profit, right? How much money can I make without a care for the planet, without a care for future generations, without a care for the farmers, especially rural women who are on the forefront every day trying to feed us. So I think why seed sovereignty now, why it's important, it's crucial. Our survival is very, very dependent on it. So I'm gonna stop ranting and yeah, let the other speakers also.
Thank you for that. Peachtree, if you can unmute yourself and let us know, what are your thoughts on the same topic?
I mean, I always love speaking after Emma because she, you know, sets the groundwork for what we see happening right now. I always try to personalize it. You know, when I started doing seed saving as a small scale farmer, you know, really learning regenerative practices and trying to find culturally appropriate seeds in a place here, I found that we were still doing it the old way. You know, I could go to different people's homes and they gave me like a purple callaloo or a purple okra that they were growing from since their tanty gave to them. And I noticed in the larger space, our representation wasn't there, finding the seeds that we needed and even kind of bring, like, you know, I got seeds from different spaces and bringing them here to acculturate them. I didn't see as much as I wanted to. And if it was, we were doing it in silos. And our seeds also carry our culture, you know, our food, how we communicate with each other. What are the things that we need at different times of the year? We've seen this as diasporic Africans moving around the world. Wherever we go, we carry our seeds and we carry our genetics with us. So really, I started to notice that in our food spaces, you know, you're seeing the same foods, tomatoes, lettuce, cucumbers, like it's a very basic output of what we are gathering. But then I would go to some elder's house and see like gungo peas growing in their backyard or things that I wasn't seeing the way that I wanted to in the grocery store. And it really forced me to start looking into these spaces. And similar to many of the things that Ama said, I ran into like, you know, there's a lot of corporate sponsors in seeds. The seeds are expensive. Most farmers are trying to buy seeds and put an output, especially if they're small farmers, and return some money to them. They are businesses. So it was an interesting space for me to start to dive into. And then that's when we start to see who are the ones that are controlling the seeds. Why are they controlling the seeds? I mean, I think the number is something like 85% of the things that we consume come from a seed. That's a high amount of things, you know? Even just some of the things that we wear on our bodies come from seeds. And it really opened my eyes to how we've been disconnected from this space. And then I was on a push to how do we reconnect to this space? How do we plug into this space? And the importance of why we need to start looking at our seeds, seed sovereignty, and really play a role in how our food systems are developing, and particularly as African diasporic people. Give thanks.
Thank you, appreciate you. We have another Ama in the chat saying, you know, they read an article on food prices rising in Ghana due to the rise in fertilizer prices. You know, a sign of more corruption and exploitation that takes place. So we appreciate you touching on that. And now for our second Ama, if you want to touch on the same topic, go ahead, please.
Yes, what's happening with our GMO seeds is pretty much criminal. I don't think it's fair to expect farmers to receive a fraction of, you know, the cost of their labor and time and to produce what we need to eat, and then turn around and force them to use seeds that doesn't regenerate itself. So every year they're constantly being forced to buy the same seed over and over again. And it's criminal when you look at the movie. It's a movie documentary, Percy versus the Giant. And he basically had his crop, you know, contaminated by GMO seeds that spilled off of a truck along the roadsides. And they tried to take him to court over what was growing now in his fields that he had no control over. And it was their malpractice, but now he's expected to pay and buy into a system that I think he's like a 12th generation farmer. Like it's a deep story of how he's had these seeds with him in his, you know, family, all these, you know, years upon generations. And now, you know, Monsanto can take him to court. Like that's criminal. And I think, you know, more of us need to really stand firm on the fact that it's not about the bottom line. It's actually about what's good for the earth, because if it's good for the earth, it's good for everybody. So.
Thank you so much for that. Very interesting story. I appreciate it. The next question is, where's the seed sovereignty movement heading towards? And if Ama from CHH, you want to start us off on that?
I think that, you know, I'm a firm believer that I think a lot of people are paying attention now, you know? A lot of people are paying attention and understanding that, you know, without seeds, there is no food, right? Without food, we as human beings and also our planet would not exist. So there are movements, global movements, a lot of indigenous communities that have been doing this silent work like for many, many generations. And also, I think one piece I want to add to this conversation is the understanding that seeds are family. You know, for a lot of indigenous communities, a seed is a life, that's a being, that's a family. It cannot be commodified, it cannot be sold. And that's really, really an important, I think, framework for us to sort of understand. There are groups like the Alliance for Food Sovereignty Africa that have been organizing across the continent on some of the seed work. There is, there are groups in Mesoamerica, a lot of indigenous groups that are doing seed work. You know, I don't know if folks know Food Sovereignty Ghana. I don't know if Food Sovereignty Ghana members are here. There's also that fight, right, that a lot of folks are involved in Ghana as well, around the prevention of genetically modified seeds. In Ghana, in itself that I think it's a very important movement for folks to follow and for folks to really listen closely to. Because, you know, think about it. You know, I grew up in a village in Kwao Pipiase, you know, I'm a Kwao girl. And I went to the farm with my grandmother, you know, every day. And I saw how her and her other farmers would trade seeds with each other very easily, you know. We worked on these seeds, it worked really well. We traded with another farmer, and that's sort of how it's done. To where now a lot of the emphasis is on, you know, genetically modified seeds and you know, and it's being flagged. I think what's so scary about this whole movement is being flagged as a food security. You have poor people in your country. We have the magic bullet, so to speak, to fix hunger. A lot of these solutions are very sort of immediate. It does not think about if you believe in the 7 generations, right? It's very immediate. Yes, you're going to get your yields right now, but what is that land, that soil, that environment going to be in the next sort of few years? Is that land going to be able to yield food to support your family, your grandchildren, and their children after? Is that land even going to be viable for all the living beings? Because I also don't want to speak as if we human beings are the only ones that need to benefit from the environment. We live in relationship with also other beings in this work. So I think even having a meeting like this, I think 10 years ago, I would have never heard of, you know, a group of folks coming together to do this work around seeds. So I think seed sovereignty movement globally is picking up. At Seed Change, the work we're doing, we actually have a series of conversations going on right now, one on seeds of survival. The first one is starting February 28th, and then we have another one March 1st. And it's really bringing together all the different groups, different organizations that have been doing work on seeds together, you know, just to have a global conversations around seeds rights, policy work, even some technical skills as well. Like I went to the UN Biodiversity Conference and I met a group from China, indigenous group that's also doing some really amazing work on seed sovereignty work there. Folks from Bolivia, folks from Mexico, like there is a real push. And one of the amazing things is, and maybe it's not even amazing, is women. All of these groups are led by women. So when I think about the Kenya Seed Savers Network, or I think about the work that AirPad is doing in Mali, the work that Food Sovereignty Ghana is doing, there is an actual movement, or even in Ireland, right? There are groups in Ireland that are also pushing. So I think that, you know, I believe in the power of collective, that as a collective, if we work together with so many other groups, we'll be able to change things. So I think the movement is strong, but I do believe that there's more work to be done, because it's very easy. These corporations have so much money. They have all the lawyers, all the resources at hand, right, to push their narrative. There are people on the continent as well who are writing articles against seed sovereignty work or against agroecology work, and really pushing this idea that we need, you know, these chemicals, we need these genetically modified seeds, but not understanding that the average rural farmer will not be able to afford some of these seeds. And actually, if you look globally, the amount of debt that farmers hold globally is astronomical. And then when you look at the large corporations, they are making about 95% of all revenue that comes from agriculture. So that goes from transportation, fertilizer, like the whole chain of food. So we know who is benefiting and we know who is suffering and who is really left at the end of the day with the debt. And agroecology and seed sovereignty is definitely possible, and it is definitely scalable, as shown globally. This is how our communities fed each other, and it wasn't necessarily based on profit. as well. So I think just some things for us to think about in this conversation, but I believe that the movement is quite real. But there's definitely work to be done, for sure. Thanks.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for that extensive answer. Appreciate you. And Ama, number 2, if you want to weigh in on this, can you please go ahead?
Yeah, just to speak again about the biodiversity piece, I think it's so critical. Like, we can't have these monocrops anymore. It's not working. It's failing, year after year after year. If you look at the stats, and I think about 1940, just after the war, when they started to use these chemicals that they were using for the wars, they switched it over to agriculture. It's literally just been decreasing the soil year after year. And no one can tell you that having one crop is better than having, 2 or 3. Like, companion planting is a proven science. Mimicking, nature, biodynamics, biodiversity, that whole spectrum of other methods of farming is superior, bar none. Like, science has proven it. And so for us to continue down this path of, GMO seeds and chemical fertilizers and, tilling the soil till it, desertifies, and now nothing grows and the wind just blows away the topsoil, and, polluting our waters. Like, I've seen, so Netflix had an eco documentary on this, where I want to say the Mississippi, one of these rivers, is gotten to the point where, like, it's like the black plague of death in these waters. Like, nothing survives, not the grasses that used to grow on the bottom, not the fish, not the oxygen levels are actually gone. Like, the water is so dead, and it's literally from the runoff of these chemical fertilizers, and no one can seem to pinpoint exactly, which farm, because, we all share the watershed. So it's kind of gotten to this tipping point where the numbers are so massive, everybody using these chemical fertilizers, that, people are bearing witness that they're no longer fishing in these waters. There's no longer any life in these waters. And the whole community is kind of, sitting there with their hands tied, because of companies that make all the money are not going to stop until they're being held accountable. So that's kind of where I see the seed sovereign movement heading towards, is just trying to address these things that are just, just ridiculous and isn't making sense and isn't working for farmers. And if we don't support, our farmers, through their sovereign seeds, like just being allowed to collect seeds, like the fact that there's legislations and laws that say that they cannot collect the seed, that they must purchase it. And now once they purchase it once, they're on record as now they have to continue purchasing it, or now they're going to get investigated. Now the government's going to bother them, because it's like, you must be harvesting seeds if you didn't buy any more this year. Like, what? Like, that is the most intrusive, unrealistic method of farming I think we could possibly have in our society of 2023, at least. Like, I feel like if we go back to traditional ways of farming, we'd all fare out a lot better. So that's where I see the seed movement going.
Appreciate you. Thank you so much. And Peachtree, how do you feel on this topic?
I was thinking as everyone was speaking, I am the co-chair of the Rastafari Association for Creatives. And in there, we elevated the farm as a space for creatives, as a space to reconnect to the land. And I watch a natural progression in our conversation right into seed sovereignty and live seed banks, living seed banks. And the way I see the seed sovereignty movement going is pushing people or welcoming folks back to the land, what I call spiritual agroecology. You kind of start with this, maybe there's a callaloo that you like, or maybe there's a, and you can't find these seeds anywhere. I've worked in, different seed companies, and definitely when people see my face, they're like, hey, do you have, and they start listing cultural seeds that they want, So it's driving our communities back to the land. And I see there was a conversation in the chat around, what does this mean for like access to land and land sovereignty and who owns the titles, and I would also say, as a farmer, if someone had explained to me at a young age that soil was an element that was repairable, that would have blown my mind a long time ago, in terms of the work that we are here to do in partnership, You know, as Amma said, it's not just for our benefit. We are working with our other plant family, water family, air. You know, we are working with all of these elements. And the seed sovereignty, I see it really opening communities' eyes. You know, where do I find the things that I want? Where do I find the seeds? I see a lot more people reaching out and asking for, hey, I'm looking for this type of seed or this type. And I really see us moving this conglomerate of corporate entities by doing this individual work, both on a small scale with small farmers, but also locally with our community members, and really going back to our ways of passing on seeds. And we know that women are doing a lot of that work and hosting our seeds, carrying our seeds, and ensuring that they are passed along generationally. So how do we continue to support those members that are really passionate about that work? Because seeds, you know, without the seeds, we don't have food. You know, and we are really working towards keeping ourselves healthy. We've seen in the last couple of years with the pandemic around the world that we are looking towards how to keep ourselves healthy, how to keep ourselves sustainable. And that can happen through us coming into the movement of seed sovereignty and not feeling like it's too small or too big. You know, whether you're a larger farmer and you want to try to buy local seeds, you're going into generative, and maybe you're a small farmer and you want to work with seeds. You're a local person, you're in a community garden and you want to, you know, share some seeds that, you know, pimento that you get from Trinidad, or someone's been growing here for a couple of years. You want to promote this amongst our community to bring us back to the land. And then that really starts to connect us to some of the other places, because as we talk about land and growing, then we got to start talking about water. We got to start talking about water quality. We got to start talking about what our soil looks like, you know? So it really connects us into a larger system. And that's where I see the seed sovereignty, that there's a lot more of meeting of the minds coming together, which will have an impact into our communities around how we work with our seed family.
Appreciate you. Thank you so much for that. The next question, excuse me, who will be most impacted by the seed sovereignty movement? Peachtree, go ahead.
Sorry, who is impacted?
Who is the most impacted by seed sovereignty movement?
Well, you know, it's very interesting how there's this like food security and it's kind of masked under some corporate stuff, but really the people who are looking for food and who need food are the most impacted by not having access to culturally appropriate food, culturally appropriate seeds, and things that they can use to nourish their bodies, right? We're talking about families, we're talking about children, we're talking about our elders. You know, when you don't have what's needed, what are you replacing your foods with? You know, how can you support what you're eating? Even the people that are doing the work on the ground, they're monitored, they're watched, you know, there's a lot of questions happening. So these are the people that are being impacted. The women who are doing the work, who are sharing our seeds, who are doing small scale farming and pushing this out into communities. They're very, not just health wise, their physicality, their bodies, you know, what they're working against, these large systems of wanting to figure out a way to, I guess, lack of a better word, break down these systems and give more folks access. They're the ones that are completely holding the weight of these systems. And similar to what Amma says, as we see, there's an increase of money being made in these corporate spaces. They've kind of set up a way where you have to come back to them for fertilizers, for this, for that. So economically, we're being affected in these spaces. You know, culturally, we're being affected in these spaces. Access to food and health-wise, we are being affected in these spaces, right? So this is why it's important for us to step in forward and really, that sovereignty piece, take control, or try to get ourselves in there to take control of some of the things that are directly happening to us as community members.
Thank you so much. And Amma from Sea Change, please weigh in. How do you feel?
I think let's look at the current food crisis. I was in a meeting with the World Food Program, and they were talking about the fact that They believe within the next sort of less than 24 months, really, Africa is going to lose about 20% of its food production. And they're anticipating that this crisis that we're currently in is going to get worse. I think we've all have seen the increase of food prices globally, right? And it's, and of course, this is not new. I think one of the things I want to emphasize is that the current food crisis that we're having is not new. Sometimes corporations like to twist a story in a particular way to benefit them in a particular way. We have always been in a food crisis. The war in Ukraine has created an avenue for corporations to actually bank on the current situation. So one of it being, you hear a lot about the chemical fertilizers, right? That, because we are very reliant on grains and also from chemical fertilizers and different things from Russia and from Ukraine. So it's very easy for these corporations to kind of spin it within their way. In the meeting, we were supposed to be discussing emergency food preparedness. And at the meeting, so much emphasis was on how Africa needs chemical fertilizers and they need it now. And my question was, if we are to talk about emergency resilience, sustainable, resilient emergency preparedness for the future, why are we focused on chemical fertilizers? Because we know that it may yield whatever the yield that we're looking for in the immediate, but in terms of long-term sustainability, right? That's not a long-term sustainability for the planet, for us as human beings. But then, I came to the realization very quickly, holy crap, there's been a lot of talk about, whether it's regenerative agriculture, organic agriculture, whatever it is, the public is alert and people care about sustainable food. These huge chemical companies understand that their future hangs a little bit in the balance, as even farmers in the West are all transitioning, right, to sustainable agriculture. You need to find a new market for your chemicals. Where are you going to find that market? If it's not backed by huge government support and it doesn't become the big, talk, right? Like, look, Africa need chemicals. They needed it like yesterday. Literally, this was the man's words, if I'm to take the notes. I wrote like literally word for word, right? And then I sat there and I'm like, who is really going to benefit from these chemicals? Is it going to be the folks on the ground that are? Because to be honest, as part of my research in Ghana, I was there and as I watched some of the farmers spraying, the weed killer, right, to clear the weeds because of a labor issue. But what that does is that you've actually also sprayed medicine. You sprayed food, right? You've actually contaminated the environment, but there's someone who is benefiting from that. And those are not farmers. So to your question in terms of who is most impacted, in a general sense, we are all impacted. When you go to the grocery store, I'm sure you feel it in your pocket, right? Like 1 minute the price is this, the next minute is another thing. But the honest truth is that it's mostly people in the global south that are going to face the huge impacts of these so-called crises that we're in right now. It's so easy. This is this high because of Ukraine. We've been in a crisis, and that crisis is that there is a corporate domination of our food system, which makes it quite difficult for farmers. How is it that the farmers who are actually toiling the land, who have been stewarding this land for many generations to take care of us, are the ones that's poor? But someone who is the middle guy or whatever you want to call them, sitting in some corporate office is the one that's making the most money. And at the end of the day, we're told that we're just lazy people. And I say, I'm like, man, if poor people are lazy people, like, because I don't know. I go to Makola Market or wherever when I'm in Ghana, and you see these women sitting under the sun, and you would not believe the time they got up, have to get their kids ready, have to head out to that market, work their butt off every day, and yet they are not rich. But we are told constantly that if we work hard, we too can be rich. When we know that that's, excuse my language, that's total bullshit. So I think that we need to understand that sometimes crises are manufactured to benefit a particular group. And when it comes, how is all this linked to seed sovereignty? They're very much linked, because the big problem with seed sovereignty is that corporate control, that heavy reliance on chemicals, and that need for farmers to go back and forth, right? Because you got to go buy those seeds, right? Each time you got to fuck out that money and you got to go back. And who keeps pocketing that money at the end of the day? So sometimes it comes in and it's marketed in our communities as a food security initiative when it has nothing to do with food security. It has more to do with this so-called investments and bring in for people to basically continue to extract, right, resources from our communities and from our neighborhoods. So I think that, the impact, we have been feeling it for generations to generations to generations, and we're feeling it now. And this current crisis we're in is not over, it's going to continue and continue. And I promise you, in 10 years, 20 years from now, there's going to be another crisis. And who is going to benefit off of that crisis? It's not going to be us. It's going to be those corporations. Their need to continuously push, right? Or one of, I think, the dangerous narratives that they have also is this idea that talking about indigenous ways of doing things or even agroecology is taking Africa backwards. And I want us to be very, very careful about that. This idea that modernization is the way, right? And I'm not saying, of course, I'm traditional, but I also understand that tradition evolves. But this idea that the ways, yes, I farmed, with the hoe, how hard it is when your back is burnt the whole time with the hoe doing this. It is bark breaking. It is difficult, but heavy machinery, heavy chemical use is never the future for us. It's actually going to be our doom and our destruction. So I know I've talked a lot. I will pause it there for now. Thanks.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Ama Mensa, you look like you have so much to say. I saw you just like amening the whole way through. So please go ahead and take your place.
No, I'm loving the conversation right now. I like just hearing everybody speak has been cherished moments for me. I recently was part of a African seed launch, and basically the whole document was about 78, 80 pages. It was just endorsing, GMO, chemicals, all the agro inputs, agro business, oh my God, they've named like economy, like there's all these things that it was basically endorsing. And it was quite sad because when I shared the document, I'm in quite a few WhatsApp groups. So when I shared the document, it felt like I was the only one that was bothered by it. So to hear everybody speaking on these, it's like, yeah, go get it, girl. Very, very happy right now. I guess the only thing I would add, like if we were going to talk about the impact, is like right now in real time, if you just do a little research on our current banana crisis, Cavendish is pretty much the only banana on the market. It's being grown everywhere in every country. It's being grown, the exact same monocropping way, and it's literally getting wiped out by a plague. And they've spent so much money on research, chemicals, all of it. They've done it all, and there's no solution. And, you know, I feel quite sad that maybe one day my grandkids won't know what it's like to eat a peanut butter and banana sandwich or a banana smoothie or banana fruit salad, or like it's happening, you know, and we're not actually doing anything to stop it from continuing to happen to all our fruits and vegetables, you know? So I feel like the impact, like everybody's saying, it's like everybody at some point, whoever ate a banana is going to be impacted when they're not around. And so I've seen actually a few videos recently on Instagram where people are, I guess they're called like fruit hunters. And so they've gone and they found bananas with like these huge black seeds where they're like, you know, spitting them out like watermelon seeds. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. I got to get my hands on one. So, you know, that's probably one of my future, when I'm old, fruit hunting missions to like find banana seeds. I don't know. We'll see what life happens. But yeah, so I'm loving everything.
That's great. The next question is, how can one begin to play an active role in the seed sovereignty movement? Ama Mensa, go ahead.
So an active way, at least for me and anybody that knows me, like Amos Lassie could test this, like if you ask me for seeds, I'm not really trying to sell seeds, I'll just give them to you because I just like to know that if anything ever happened to my seeds, I can come to you. Like I really see people just making a network amongst themselves that, you know, just make things readily available, especially if you have it. I think at least for me with seed sovereignty is we're trying to educate how to even store seeds properly. Here in Ghana, it's very hot and seeds cannot withstand the heat for very long. And so I'll, you know, try to go to, you know, various seed vendors and, you know, purchase some of the seeds, and the viability rate will be very low, if at all, just depending on like the stock or the year or just how it was stored. And so I realized that, you know, back to waste management, I'm very passionate because I feel there's a lot that we can do to upcycle and salvage, you know, a lot of these waste materials if we can just recover them. So like for me, this used to contain coconut oil. Now it contains, you know, what they call here cowpeas, but it's a local tea. It's like a bush bean and it grows easily and everywhere. And I just keep this in a cold, you know, storage in glass. Glass definitely helps keep it cool. And I know I can come back to these at any point. Every 2 years is be the most opportune time to plant them because you do want to be able to harvest your seeds again. Again, this is just black pepper coming out here. Black pepper was kind of hard to find, and like a lot of seasonings that I'm used to was hard to find. So I was like, okay, as soon as I got my hands on some seeds, I was like, I'm definitely going to jar it, make sure there's no air, and keep it somewhere cold. And of course, moringa seeds, another way. Like this is just a little apple juice jar that I was able to upcycle. So just like being very wise with how you store the seeds, and even sharing information about just the best practices when it comes to seeds, because a lot of people have seeds. Granted, if they're like dry and it's a cold place, you know, the sky's the limit. I've heard of stories where they've recovered seeds from, you know, the tombs of Egypt and they were still viable. But you do want to make sure that at the end of the day, you are storing them in, you know, something that's going to keep them cool, like glass. They are in somewhere dark. The seeds are dry to begin with. So you do want them to dry out. You don't want any moisture because moisture creates life. Life creates, you know, bacteria, funguses, viruses, and you just don't want, you know, your seeds to spoil. So anything like this, if you could just upcycle, and, you know, this was strawberry jam. So anything like that you could upcycle to, you know, serve, you know, the community, because you may not need the seed today, but you never know. A neighbor might ask you, hey, you got these seeds, and just being able to pass that on or having an exchange of seeds is wonderful. And if you do know reputable companies, you know, share them. Like for me in Ghana, when I found Call to Nature, I was like in heaven. I was getting his tomato seeds, his alligator seeds, his papaya seeds. I was like, Call to Nature is my favorite, you know, Ghanaian seed company, and I will endorse him and support him till the day I die. Like he's doing amazing work, and I'm looking forward to actually going to his farm one of these days. But he's been he's just done good business, and everybody I've referred him to has not complained. So again, if you find seed companies that, you know, you like, and, you know, support them, and like always buy extra seeds. That's what I have loofah seeds, I'll share them. If I have pepper seeds, I'll share them. If I have moringa, I'll share them. I definitely feel like the more people have these seeds, the less, you know, insecure we'll be amongst ourselves.
Appreciate that. Thank you so much for sharing. Peachtree, the same question to you. How does one play an active role in the seed sovereignty movement?
I'm a builder. I'm a creator. So I see something happening and I'm like, how do I get in and support? So, I mean, from an organizing level, I do as many seed saving workshops as possible anywhere I go, encouraging from, someone who's doing a small scale growing a community garden to maybe a small scale farmer is like, how can we get together and start our seed saving, kind of getting ourselves into the culture of our seeds are not meant to be on shelves, so how do we get them back into the ground every 2 years? How do we regrow them and share them with each other? I'm old school. When I go visit my elders, I still bring seeds. Everywhere I go in the world, period. People laugh when I say this because like, don't you get in trouble? And I'm like, sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But I still advance this practice and push this practice of I am bringing seeds to my elders. And also, seeds are our currency, As I mentioned before, I'm on this table with the Rastafari creatives. Our diets are very specific. Anywhere I go, I bring seeds, I get food. It's an exchange. It's an automatic exchange. I go to Trinidad and I cry, when we hear about the bananas, like you're feeding me bananas, Chiquita bananas. And like, this is a country that produces bananas. But if I take my seeds to a small scale farmer, I'm getting an abundance of fresh grown vegetables, of heirloom things that they've been growing and sharing amongst each other. So I have this one network this way that I work with people when I bring seeds, I'm like, I have these seeds. They're very special to me. I want to give them to you, but I need you to commit to two things, which is that you will share with somebody else. You will not just take these and grow them for profit. Because I understand the idea of also needing money, but you will share. You will continue to cultivate this seed, and that we continue this practice. So really, like I said in my answer before, really paying attention to how we start to push something back into our culture, remembering a particular way about ourselves, and really working in that way so that we can start to increase these seeds. And then I think on a larger scale space, because I do work in some of the not-for-profit spaces and business creation, right now I'm trying to develop a space where how do I get some money to work with 4 farmers that will grow out, 100 bed of one type of seed that we can share in community so we can start to push these seeds back into community. So I feel like if you have an idea around how you want to get involved, there's networks available. I'm always open into building larger networks of seed savers. The one thing about when you meet growers, they always have new information. They always going to teach you something new. There's no way you're at the epitome of learning when you walk into a room with all of these growers and seed savers and land workers, So really putting yourself into these spaces. I saw a suggestion in this room around having a charter. I think these conversations, especially from a global scale, is very important so that we are not working in isolation, and particularly as the diaspora who may not be in some of the countries that we're from, how we are supporting this work in a circular space and a circular economy amongst each other is important. So we have to keep having conversations. We have to see that some of the fertilizer conversations that were happening in the Caribbean, they're now pushing into the continent. And we're like, wait, look what happened here. Environmental racism is something that we have stood up beside and yelled about and spoken about for generations. This is not new to us. And this is happening in our food system. So really bring your ideas. And I always say to people, these spaces need whatever your expertise are. You don't have to be a grower. Maybe you're someone that does great grant writing. Maybe you're someone that has a space to grow some seeds. Maybe you have a great network of people. Bring your skills, because this work needs everybody and everybody's skills. And share those seeds. Share them. It might seem small to you, but that little purple okra seed that you got from somebody and you give to somebody else, they may grow that out and share for the next 4 generations, and you've participated in moving seed sovereignty. You've participated in us bringing some of these resources back into our hands.
Appreciate that. Someone said many hands make light work. So it's very true. And you touched on that. Appreciate it. Ama from Seed Change, go ahead.
I wanted to say that I've shared some links in the chat The first one I want to talk about is Bella. Bella is an initiative that started by Abena Ofejima. She's from Ghana, from actually northern Ghana, Bolgatanga. And you know, one way that folks can support is one, check out her website and check out the work that she started there around starting a seed bank called Bella to preserve, you know, African ancestral seeds. And one way to do that is for us as people to also eat our cultural foods. Because one way that genetically modified food takes over our food system is when they push only a particular type of food. You know, how many people know that Ghana, we have actually an indigenous rice that grows very well in the Volta region, not in rice fields, grows very well in the Volta region. But right now, China rice, Taiwan rice, whatever you want to call it, rice have taken over the Ghana market, right? So in the next sort of few years, those foods that are actually super healthy, so much more healthier and very delicious. Like I had one of the grandmas make me like this a meal from that cultural food and from seeds that taste like peanuts. Like she made this peanut stew, but it's not peanuts, it's these seeds she actually took from the forest, and we went with her to get it. And she made this food with the rice, and it was so delicious. So one way that we can all support is by eating our cultural ancestral foods, because if you eat it, it means the farmers have a reason to grow it. Right? That's one way that we can do that. You want to keep diversity alive and you want to keep this going, you have to eat your cultural foods. That's one. So really follow the work of Bella, because one of the things she's doing is saving a lot of, like, especially in northern Ghana, a lot of the cultural ancestral foods that we have in Ghana that we don't value. It's like shea butter. How many Ghanaian people value shea butter? I grew up poor. So trust me, when your parents tell you to go shower and you don't really shower, you know, when you just wash your face and then we just dash on a lot of shea butter, and I'm sure we were shiny under the African sun, you know. But now shea butter, it's like worth how many millions, if not billions of dollars globally. We're just gonna sit there until somebody comes and go, whoa, I could do something with this. And then we lose it. And then it no longer even becomes ours. So I think one way we can be involved is understanding what our cultural ancestral foods are. I always say to people, jollof is not a cultural ancestral food. Let's get that straight. It's not. It's kind of like fry bread, right? For indigenous communities, right? You get what the white man gave you and you make amazing things come out of it. And trust me, Black people, we know how to do that. You know, somebody give you flour, sugar, and look how many things we create out of that, right? But that's not our cultural ancestral food. And we are losing that. And that's one way of getting involved also in some of this food work. I think we also scratch the surface of a bigger understanding of what seed sovereignty is. If folks are really interested, check out some of the other links that I shared there. The Seed Savers Network of Kenya, and also Seed Change where I work. There's a few conversations that's coming for folks to, if you're interested, to learn a little bit more, because I think some of the pieces Alma, Peach, mentioned, and myself, you could literally make each one its own separate workshop, and we don't have the time for that, obviously. But I do encourage you that if you are interested, to do your homework, to learn as much as you can. And I think that conversations like this among us as people shouldn't be a one-off conversations. I think it should be ongoing in terms of bringing folks like Peachtree who are actually saving seeds, doing the work. I think I come more from maybe a different sort of level in this conversation, but it's also good to meet the actual farmers You know, even if we need to translate some of the conversation, I think is important. Like I met some amazing farmers with so much knowledge. I look at them and I'm like, oh my God, if this elder dies, all that knowledge they have with them goes with them. You know, like Ama, you were talking about how to save under these conditions. You know, there's an elder who use a clay pot, you know, the clay water thing that they make. She used that to save seeds, and that keeps the seeds cool in really hot conditions. You know, these are all knowledges of how to do it without necessarily buying a fridge to pay for electricity and things that we can afford. They were very innovative in the ways that they did things without it necessarily breaking the bank. And I think that's important for us to consider. And I think one important piece we cannot forget is that it's great to have seed banks. They are needed, but nothing is better than the land itself. You know, the land is where you save seeds, you know, by passing the seeds around, other people growing that seeds and sharing that seeds is the way that we're preserving that. You know, for us that to work in the West, we go to the grocery store and you see only maybe 2 or 3 different types of tomatoes, but how many people know the different varieties that exist, different varieties of potatoes, different varieties of banana, like all these amazing foods that was literally given to us by the Creator to help us through any sort of climate crisis that come along. So I've chatted a lot, but scratched the surface, and I really hope that, you know, we can have more conversations among ourselves for those that are interested. And one last piece, sorry, I forgot to mention, seed work is a very slow, patient work. It's any work that actually is about sustainability. It's not fast, it's not now. It does not conform to white supremacy capitalist agenda. It has its own natural way of working. If you're interested in this work, it's also understanding that it takes time. I didn't even know that some cabbages, it takes 2 years to get seeds from it. I used to think, oh, you plant it after the season, you get something and then you can do. No, 2 years, you know? So it takes time. It takes generations even. And we have to be up for this work, especially if we want this planet to survive. Thanks.
Thank you so much for sharing. We appreciate everything. Ama Mensa, as we're closing, this last question is for you. Is there still any other calls to actions you have for the Black community, and what are they?
I guess don't be overwhelmed. Like, I feel like sometimes because there's so much going on in the world and it can make you feel pretty small and insignificant, like there's nothing that you can do. It's all just about taking that first step. You know, we're all learning. No one's going to master everything. Like I just found out pineapples don't grow on a tree. Before I came to Ghana, I swore they grew on a tree. And then I came to our property and it grows on a prickly cactus bush. I was like, what? Didn't know that. Now I do, but like, you know, every day is an opportunity to learn more. I never had to think twice about waste management. You know, in Canada, everything just goes away. It's like they have this magic trick that makes you believe that you can buy as many plastic bottles of water instead of just having a reusable one because it's okay, everything just goes away. Coming to Ghana, you're like, oh my God, everything floods. It doesn't go away. It clogs up the gutters, it's polluting the waters, it's in the soil, there's microplastics in my fish. Why am I eating anyway, sorry. So yeah, don't get overwhelmed. Just, you know, start where you can. Like if it's just, you know, as simple as a reusable water bottle and just saying no more single-use plastic, you will have done more than, you know, generations before us, because, you know, there was a time where it used to be paper or plastic, and now it's just plastic. So, you know, there's many ways that you can, you know, move this movement forward. If you can, save a few seeds. You know, it may not be today, it may not be tomorrow, but maybe in a year or two when the prices hit the roof, you're like, oh, gold, you know, like, you know, all of a sudden it's more valuable than when you first got them. So, you know, these are just little things I think everybody can do if you find ways in your own life that, you know, can move the milestone a bit closer to the finish line. we all know where we want to end. We all want to be sovereign and not, on a death march.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's something we can all walk away from. And like you said, we can start anywhere. Don't look at the big picture, just start with one thing at a time, right? I appreciate that. I want to thank each and every one of our guests. Oh, Peachtree has her hand up. What did you want to say? Go ahead.
I was just going to say that when I do my workshops, I say to people, check out one plant that you're very fascinated with, just one. Sometimes whatever plant is drawn to you, whatever tree, whatever you see growing and it keeps appearing to you, just take some time and draw it, look at how it seeds, look at how it grows. What's its spiritual significance to different indigenous cultures? The more you draw near to something that's showing up in your life is the more you'll start to learn things about plants that you didn't know. Some plants don't even have seeds, like fig trees are seeded with wasps, their own wasps that fly in there and seed these figs. But I wouldn't have known that if I didn't stand on someone's lawn and observe this tree and was like, I don't know a lot about this. So just, even if it feels overwhelming, just check out a plant and just put a little bit of focus and time on it. And it will equally reciprocate that energy with you and give you some information and some knowledge. And that's a great place to start.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Thank you to each and every one of our panelists. We really value and appreciate everything that you brought to the conversation today. Very enlightening. People are already dropping their gratitude in the chat. So thank you so much for being here. We also want to appreciate everybody else who attended. Thank you so much and for staying to the end. As always, we want to close the session today the way we started, by acknowledging the original stewards of the various lands that we are all on, and acknowledge our ancestors, also those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We want to acknowledge all the elders and the community stewards whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, and learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. Thank you so much for attending, everyone.